Ireland isn't like most countries in Europe. It is heavily isolated from the rest of its fellow EU members, and this isolation is something that's shaped a unique national identity, and one that's, interestingly, beginning to shift. And it's shifting in a particularly strange way. Ireland is making itself more nationalist. It sounds natural, after all. The history of an isolated island nation, a perpetually subjugated population, and a civil war that nearly ended the country as we know it, makes for a compelling story of an actively unfolding future. This is the transformation of Ireland, an unusual transformation, and a rejection of the political thinking by which Ireland was guided for decades. It's easy to tell why Ireland is different. It doesn't really fit the mold of most European Union nations. While it's not the furthest from Brussels as the crow flies, it's arguably the most physically isolated. Unlike the Scandinavian countries, which are linked to the European mainland by a number of bridges into Denmark, or something like the Channel Tunnel, which connected England to the rest of the EU, at least, while it was still a member state, Ireland has no such physical links. Unlike most EU member nations, there's only one truly large city in Ireland, the capital city, Dublin. With a population 1.6 million strong, it is the only Irish city with a population over 1 million people. In fact, it's the only Irish city with a population over 250,000. As a result, the already small population of Ireland is spread amongst much smaller towns. As a general rule, density is directly correlated to productivity, and Ireland doesn't have much density. Dublin has a burgeoning tech sector, but elsewhere in the nation, most of the economy relies heavily upon the agricultural sector to survive. In 1845, the Irish potato famine hit the island with incredible force. A disease caused the primary source of food to be rendered inedible, and much of the food that would have been edible was shipped back to Britain, thus starving the Irish population. The monotony of the crop at the time, a practical choice for cost-cutting, given the limited income of most Irish families at the time, naturally lends itself to disease. To give you a sense of just how destructive the famine was, before this famine, the Irish population was roughly 8 million people, and today, it's only around 7 million. The nation has still not recovered. Ireland is also a partition nation. Yes, there is the obvious divide between Northern Ireland and the Republic, but there's also a prominent religious divide between Protestants and Catholics, which exists across the island. While there are major religious divides within other nations, no other has led to a new border being drawn or a civil war being fought in relatively recent times. For all those reasons, Ireland really does have a foundation unlike any other European Union equivalent, which makes its history and perhaps its future far more interesting and unusual. As Ireland started growing up as a nation, it adopted a very empathetic attitude towards immigration and asylum seekers. An article from Tribune says, "Patriotism and nationalism in Ireland have long been tied to progressive ideals, as opposed to much of the rest of Europe, where patriotism has been associated with a nation's colonial past. Ireland generally considers itself immune to the far-right populism taking hold across Europe. It is a common trope in Ireland that people will look at the continent with a wry smile and sneer, thinking that the growth of far-right movements could never take off here. With such a brutal history in its past, Ireland has never been one for extremist politics. There have never been any major far-right groups, either in the Dáil or in the Seanad. So why now are there so many more significant far-right discussions taking place in far more legitimate ways than ever before. Well, Ireland has long tried to maintain its identity as an Irish nation, not just a former British colony. Every street sign has both English and Irish Gaelic. Every child in school is required to learn Gaelic, supposedly much to their chagrin. And there are even several regions on the island designated as Gaeltacht, which speak exclusively Irish. But that's about where it ended, until recently. This is Tig. He's a fictional character based on a real person. We will use him to illustrate the shifts in Ireland's social culture. Tig lives here in County Kerry, on the southwest tip of the island of Ireland. Tig is primarily a cow farmer, but he also runs a small hotel in the town centre. He loves bragging about how his fields are the greenest and his livestock the strongest, but in reality, Tig relies on the income from his hotel more than any of the farming he does. This part of Ireland is incredibly touristy, as people come to see the beautiful mountains, lakes, and wildlife of Kerry. But then in 2020, something happens that he could have never anticipated. COVID swept through the entire world, of course, but hit Tig especially hard. His tourism-focused income essentially dried up overnight. No more tourists means no more hotel. Tig now has to refocus his efforts on farming, but there is truly no way for him to compensate for his lack of income. He has to significantly cut back on his living expenses, and his quality of life decreases. Over time, he becomes resentful towards the mismanagement of the pandemic, which pushes him more and more towards the fringe parties, particularly on the right side of the spectrum. Similar people across the country are in very similar situations, and as a result are also aligning themselves more and more with far-right groups. Now it is 2023, and the tourism industry is finally returning to Ireland, following relaxed regulations from Dublin. Tig is beginning to slowly recover some of his income. However, his course soon shifts with a call he receives. The government is offering a significant sum of money to anyone who is willing to accommodate Ukrainian refugees. Tig agrees. He is happy to receive the extra sum and begins to host refugees, offering them work in his hotel. However, not everyone in Ireland is quite as happy. There have been a string of anti-immigration protests across the nation on the alleged grounds that the central government, particularly the leftist Sinn Féin party, is neglecting its own citizens, shifting its focus towards immigrants. Approximately 16,000 people are living in states of housing uncertainty, or emergency housing, of which almost a third of them are children. It is worth noting for the sake of accuracy that causation has not been concretely tied to the correlation regarding this issue. Just like that, a perfect storm begins to brew. Now is when far-right political groups really begin to capitalize on the dismay of the populace. Far-right groups organize protests, meetings, and demonstrations. Groups that were once considered extremist are now being seen as political parties, worthy of attention and support. This is a trend globally. Of course, the obvious comparison is the United States, but their far-right movement is evidently slightly further along than the one in Ireland. However, the United States may represent the future of Ireland's politics. If this course is maintained, any extremism in politics is extremely dangerous. But when a global trend of extremism is combined with a perfect storm of international crises, all being forced upon an ill-equipped nation, a dangerous Pandora's box is slowly broken open. For decades, Ireland's greatest asset was its political sensibility and centrist thinking. But for the first time in a long time, that thinking is beginning to break down. What will happen next is anyone's guess. But in time, I'm sure Ireland will be missing its ex-ante status when it has to undo the scars of its ex-post. That is why Ireland is trying to make itself more nationalist, more isolated, more extremist. The Irish flag is green, orange, and white. Green for Catholics, orange for Protestants, and white for peace. So, no matter what happens in Ireland's future, the most important thing to remember is the peace at the very center of Ireland's national symbol. Thanks for watching.